Today, me and Tuck are going to share with you 10 crops you could still plant in June. Let's go! Now that it's June, things are heating up, which means it's time to get our warm weather crops growing. If you're feeling like it's too late, rest easy. There's still plenty of time to get your garden going. I suggest you start with some cucumbers. There's nothing like grabbing some fresh cucumbers right off the vine in the heat of the summer. Homegrown ones are so juicy and so delicious. They taste far superior to those green things that they sell in the store and label as cucumbers. You still have plenty of time to direct sow your cucumbers, or you can start them in cells and transplant them out. Cucumbers love the heat and hate the cold, making right now a fantastic time to get your cucumbers going. Cucumber beetles tend to be one of the biggest obstacles when growing cucumbers. One thing you can do is avoid them by planting some varieties that are less attractive to the cucumber beetle. Varieties like the Suyo long cucumber and the Socrates cucumber are burpless. This means they lack the chemical compound known as cucurbitacin. This is what makes cucumbers bitter, and this is also what brings in the cucumber beetles. So when planting, make sure you grow some varieties that are burpless. To protect your plants when they're young, I suggest using an insect netting, like you see right down here. I'm using this insect netting to keep these strawberries safe from the birds, but the insect netting will keep the cucumber beetles off your young plants when they're highly susceptible. This will allow those young plants to get a good footing. Then, when you see the cucumber plants start to flower, remove that insect netting so the bees can come in and pollinate. Another way to keep your plants safe from the cucumber beetle is to spray them with surround kaolin clay. That's that white stuff that you just saw on those young plants. This acts as a protectant and makes the plants much less appealing to the cucumber beetle. Imagine being a beetle, biting into one of those plants and getting a mouth full of clay. Cucumbers are one of those plants where the more you pick, the more you get. When you start seeing those young cucumbers on the vine, make sure you go out and pick them even when they're small. If you allow even one cucumber to fully ripen on the vine, then the whole vine will quit producing. So stay on top of picking your cucumbers. The next crop you could still plant in June are squash. You still have plenty of time to get this sun-loving veggie into the ground. Squash come in so many different shapes and colors, which makes them a lot of fun and super rewarding to grow. We grow both summer squash and winter squash. Some of my favorite varieties of summer squash that I always plant are Costado Romanesco, white scallop squash, Englisher custard squash, and then some of my favorite winter varieties are the butternut squash and also a buttercup squash. Right behind me, I have some Englisher custard squash growing right here, and we always make sure that we have good protection in the form of some spray, insect netting, or just a really good dog that's always working hard out here. Make sure you spam some hearts down low if you love seeing the young boss in the videos. He likes snacking on some of the zucchini too. He loves his squash. This guy's always out here grabbing his snacks. Now is a great time to either direct sow squash into the garden or plant in cells and transplant it out. Make sure you use large cells though, because the squash grow super fast. And also make sure you mix in some all-purpose fertilizer either before you're starting your seed or when you're transplanting out. Notice this right here. We've got a Zucchino rampicante. This is a really cool squash because you can eat it early in the season as a summer squash, or you could let it fully ripen like a winter squash would. This is one that I grew last year. I harvested it later in the season and it lasted all year inside. It's still good. So it's a pretty amazing variety, this one here. When it comes to your squash, don't worry if you're feeling like it's a little late. These things grow so quickly. I mean, you look one way and then you turn back and it's like the squash double in size. Once the weather changes, like it is at this time of the year, and it's nice out, they grow so incredibly quickly. One thing that's a big issue when it comes to your squash are the squash vine borers. A few ways that you can manage them or prevent them is by using that kaolin clay spray that I showed with you earlier, or you can use an insect netting. Another thing you could do too is plant another round of squash in late June, early July, because the squash vine borers stop laying eggs around that time. So if you plant a late round of squash, then you'll be able to just avoid those squash vine borers altogether. June is the ideal time to get some green beans planted. You can see I have some planted right here, and I grow these in this square foot method and plant 9 beans in 1 square foot, and they still grow great. Beans are an easy crop to grow, but they do not like being transplanted. So you always want to direct sow your beans. They only take about 7 days to sprout, and they grow quick once they come up. If you've never grown the dragon tongue bean before, I suggest you plant this one. It's probably mine and Tuck's all-time favorite bean. All I gotta do is even mention it, and this guy shows up. He knows that there's dragon tongues on deck. I bet if he sees it, he's like, oh man, I'm thinking about last year eating those. When it comes to your green beans, you want to make sure that you're planting bush beans like this, but if you're planting pole beans, you really need to make sure that you're trellising them. If you plant pole beans in a bed like this, they will go around and strangle out a lot of your plants. When it comes to green beans or most other crops, you want to plant different rounds of them. You can see this was a round I planted about a week or two after the other one. They're just starting to come up. This way we always have beans producing. Beans are similar to cucumbers too. The more you pick, the more you get. When you see those young green beans on the plant, make sure to stay on top of picking. It's still a great time to get some melons planted. You could plant some watermelons, big red juicy ones, small yellow ones, or even small white ones. You could plant cantaloupes, some of those delicate orange ones. Oh, they taste so good, it's like candy. When it comes to your melons, they thrive in the heat and hate the cold, similar to your squash plants. And you can either direct sow them, and they'll take about 3 to 10 days to sprout. It's based on the temperature of the soil. So if we were to direct sow our melons in this bed right now, they would only take about probably 5 days to sprout. Or we could plant some in cells, like you see here, and then transplant them into the garden. When it comes to melons, if you're in a short season, make sure you grow some varieties that are relatively quick producing. For instance, the blacktail watermelon, this one only takes 70 days from seed to harvest. But the moon and stars watermelon, this one takes about 100 days from seed to harvest. So make sure you grow a variety that's relatively quick producing if you have a short season or if it's a little late in the season. When it comes to your melons, they have very similar pests to your cucumbers and your squash, so follow those same instructions that I gave you about using insect netting, using the clay spray, and just try to avoid them as much as you possibly can. Another thing about melons is when they start growing and they're starting to expand, you don't want the soil to really dry out and then have a heavy watering, or that can make your melon split. So what you want to do is put down a mulch, like a diced leaf mulch is a great option. This will make sure the soil stays consistently moist, and then it will give you a less chance of your melons and cantaloupes actually splitting open when a big rain comes. June is a great time to transplant out some of the best crops you can grow in your backyard garden, in my opinion, like tomatoes. When it comes to tomatoes, I grow so many different varieties. There's such an incredible level of diversity in the color, the size, the shape, and the flavor. It makes tomatoes one of the most fun crops to grow. It's June 1st today. If you were to plant tomatoes from seed, I still think you would get a harvest, but if you can get some tomatoes that are already growing and transplant them into the garden, that would be the most ideal, because now is the perfect time for the tomatoes to be soaking up the sun. Look how healthy and beautiful these tomatoes look. They're all set into the ground and they're growing instead of like transitioning, which is good at this time of the year because they love soaking up this kind of sun. When it comes to your tomatoes, you'll notice I trellis them like this. That's how I like to grow them, and it allows me to grow a lot of tomatoes in a small amount of space. When you're transplanting out your tomatoes, if you can, bury them deeper than they came out of the pot, and that will allow the tomato stem to grow more roots, and you'll get bigger fruits by the end of things. Check out some of these tomatoes down here. So even though these ones are a little further ahead than the ones you might get in the ground, there's still plenty of time to get your tomatoes into the ground, so you could be harvesting some fresh tomatoes. Nothing like it. If you have some tomatoes growing, then you need to make sure you get some basil planted as well. Both the classic Genovese basil, like you see right there, staple, but also a cool purple basil like you see right here. This one is stunning looking. This is their purple opal basil. So when it comes to your basil, the seeds take about 5 to 10 days to sprout. So you could start some from seed right now if you want to. But when it comes down to it, because basil are such great companions both in the garden and in the kitchen with tomatoes, you want them to be about the same age. So if you're going to transplant out tomatoes, I suggest you transplant out some basil as well. When it comes to your basil though, one thing you want to stay on top of is continuing to pick them, because if you pick these tops off when they start to flower, it'll encourage the plant to keep bushing out and it'll kind of prevent it from flowering. Similar to cucumbers, the more you pick, the more you get. So say this top part was flowering right here, I would come by and pick off this basil right here when I pick that basil off, you can see those little tops right there, those shoots. Those will start to grow and the basil will start to bush out even more. This will allow you to get more from your basil, extend the season of it, and it's just a fantastic way to get more out of a single plant. In June, we still have plenty of time to get some sweet potatoes planted. Sweet potatoes are such a beautiful vine, and the tubers are packed with vitamins and minerals. I grow them a lot of times in containers, so if you don't have a lot of space, that's not an issue. You can still plant them on your patio. Sweet potatoes are tropical plants, so they love the heat, making right now a really good time to get them planted. So when it comes to your sweet potatoes, we grow them from slips. You could either grow your own slips from an old sweet potato, or you could buy some slips online from a reputable company like Fedco. That's usually what I do. So we've got some sweet potato slips in here. I've been just keeping them in this cocoa core, which is nice and damp, to make sure that they're ready for when I want to transplant them out. You can see the roots, they look really healthy, these roots right here. I'll be able to just stick these into the ground and these sweet potatoes will start to grow. So sweet potatoes are one of those things where you really got to try growing them yourself. They're a lot of fun to grow. You don't need a lot of space if you grow them in containers, and you still get a really nice, delicious harvest from them. One of the fertilizers that I found that work really good with my potatoes and my sweet potatoes is the turbo tuber fertilizer. So if you're going to grow some potatoes, you should try that out. Now is the perfect time to get some peppers transplanted into the garden. Me and Tuck love growing peppers because we absolutely adore grabbing the fresh snacks right off the plant. Last year, Tuck was in love with the Cornito Arancia pepper. He was really snacking on those. It's a great feeling to go out there and grab a whole basket or a whole bowl full of peppers. When it comes to my peppers, I really like growing them in containers because they take so long to produce. I grow them in containers so that they don't take up space in my garden, because it seems like when the peppers start hitting like their level of production, at that time I like to transition some of my garden into fall, and the peppers are kind of left there almost in the way. So when I grow peppers in containers, it allows them to continue to produce late into the fall and not take up some space in my garden that I want to like transition over into my fall crops. So when it comes to peppers, I wouldn't really plant them from seed right now. You just don't have enough time. They take a pretty long time to grow. So get some peppers planted, well, at this time of the year, transplanted into your garden or in a pot. My favorite way of growing them. Eggplants are similar to peppers in regards to time. I wouldn't plant them from seed right now, but you still definitely have plenty of time to transplant some eggplants into your garden. Just like my peppers too, I like growing my eggplants in containers because same as my peppers, they produce late in the season and I don't want them taking up valuable real estate in my garden in some of my beds while I'm transitioning into fall. So eggplants, there are so many different colors you can get them in. I grow like the purple rosita one is one of my favorite. Then I also grow like the Listata de Gandia, which is purple and white mixed. And then I also even grow the all white eggplant. So it's like really cool. And some of my eggplants in containers are some of my highest producing eggplants that I've ever grown. So don't be afraid to grow some in pots, especially if you don't have a lot of space. In June, there's still plenty of time to get flowers planted to bring some more color to your garden and draw in beneficial insects. Here you see some chamomile, a great flower. Right next to it, I have some zinnia planted. The butterflies love the zinnia, so I always have that one in the garden. Over here, I'm growing some marigolds right at the center here, just getting ready to start flowering. We're excited for that one. Then let's move over into the other garden. You'll notice I have even some radishes and stuff that I'll allow to flower. That'll bring in some insects, and even some cilantro. I'll let that flower, it's about to flower. That'll draw in a lot of beneficials. Come over here. Look at all the tomatoes we got grown in just this small section right here. You can't forget about some of the perennial flowers like the echinacea. This is one of my favorite all-time functional flowers. So fantastic to grow in the garden. I also like growing things like sunflowers. Some of the sunflowers that I've grown have beautiful colors on them, and some of them have gotten so tall, like I'm saying like almost 10 feet tall. They're massive. Come over here. We also have some borage growing right here. This is one of my favorite all-time companion flowers. This thing comes up on its own. It's a great flower overall. I'm also growing things like calendulas. that's an awesome flower too. So when it comes down to it, you want to make sure you're getting a lot of flowers planted in the garden. Those are just going to draw in so many beneficial insects, make the garden beautiful, and they're just something you need to get planted, and you still have time in June. Me and Tuck want to give you a bonus crop before we let you go, and it's one that we don't really plant ourselves, but you could try your hand at it and you still have time to get it in the ground. I'm talking about corn. So we don't really plant corn because we don't have that much space, even though it might appear so. And you need a good amount of space to plant corn because you need a lot of it because it's wind pollinated. You could still get some pollination by either doing it by hand, or you'll get like a low level of pollination, maybe just a few ears. Overall, it's not something that we particularly like to grow, but it's something you can get in the ground and try your hand at. Tuck wanted to come over and say that that's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you got something out of it. Spam some hearts down low for the young king, always out here working hard. It's a beautiful day and the garden is looking incredible. Definitely the best it has ever looked. If you just take a pan around, things have reached an absolute peak. We're super excited. We're so close to bringing in big harvests and we're really excited about it. Just come over to the tower garden real quick, the strawberry one. We've got strawberries that are ripening right on this, just to show you that you don't need a lot of space to grow a lot of food. And just try to make sure in the future you're not just focused on annuals like what we went over today, but you're also planting some perennials like strawberries. It's going to make a massive difference for your garden in the future. And overall, you just got to get some of them in the ground. Me and Tuck wanted to send a thank you to one of our new channel members, Slow and Homesteady NJ. Looks like we got a fellow Jersey gardener and homesteader, so we're happy that you're part of the team. Me and Tuck wanted to thank you for having your hand in everything we're doing back here. Stay tuned, more videos are coming and the harvests are going to start rolling in soon. Me and Tuck are so happy with how things are going and we encourage you to get some stuff planted. It's the only way you're going to be able to grab a harvest. Tuck and James will be back again real soon. We out.